Nathan Caldwell sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of old documents, his fingers tracing the edges of a fragile parchment. He had spent years uncovering the secrets of the powerful, but nothing had ever intrigued him quite like the mystery surrounding Angelina Jolie. For decades, she had been one of the most recognizable women in the world, a global icon whose humanitarian efforts were as well known as her film career. But something about her past had always seemed deliberately obscured, as if a part of her history had been wiped away. Nathan had first stumbled upon Angelina Jolie's name in a place where it didn't belong, an old aristocratic archive buried deep in London's historical records. He had been researching an entirely different subject when he noticed a peculiar entry from the late 1800s, listing a family name connected to Angelina Jolie's maternal lineage. The document suggested a direct link between her ancestors and a noble bloodline that had once been close to the British throne. It was the kind of connection that should have been well documented, but instead, it had been buried beneath decades of missing records and altered family trees. Determined to understand what he had found, Nathan spent weeks searching for more. Every attempt to follow Angelina Jolie's lineage beyond a certain point led him to dead ends, family names that had suddenly changed, individuals who had disappeared from records entirely. It was as if someone had deliberately erased part of her ancestry. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that this was no accident. Someone had hidden Angelina Jolie's true heritage, and they had done so with precision. Nathan knew that Angelina Jolie had always been a fiercely private person, guarding her personal life from the public eye. But if she had any idea about this buried lineage, she had never spoken about it. Why would someone so outspoken about justice, identity, and human rights remain silent about a family history that connected her to one of the most powerful institutions in the world? The thought gnawed at him. If Angelina Jolie had been kept in the dark about this, then he was about to uncover something she had never known. And if she did know, then she had chosen to keep it hidden for a reason. The real breakthrough came when Nathan managed to track down a collection of letters from an old aristocratic estate, locked away in the archives of a forgotten family line. As he carefully unfolded the delicate pages, he felt his breath hitch. The letters described a scandal, a child born in secrecy, hidden from the public to protect the royal bloodline. The writing was cryptic, never explicitly naming the individuals involved, but the dates and locations lined up with the gaps in Angelina Jolie's ancestry. Nathan pieced it together. A forgotten heir, removed from history, their lineage continuing in silence, leading all the way to Angelina Jolie. This wasn't just a distant relation to nobility. This was a bloodline that had been deliberately hidden, concealed from the world, for generations. If Angelina Jolie was connected to the royal family, it meant that someone, at some point, had decided that the world could never know. Nathan leaned back in his chair, staring at the scattered documents before him. He had uncovered many secrets in his time, but this was different. This was a revelation that had the power to shake history itself. The question now wasn't whether it was true. He had the proof in front of him. The real question was why. Why had Angelina Jolie's family been erased from royal history? And who had done it? As he sat there, trying to process the weight of what he had just discovered, a quiet unease settled over him. If he had found this information, then others could too. And if it had been hidden for this long, then someone had gone to great lengths to keep it that way. He knew that digging further could bring consequences, but Nathan had never been one to walk away from the truth. The next step was clear. He had to find Angelina Jolie. He had to tell her what he had uncovered. What he didn't know was whether she already knew, and whether she would want the truth to come out at all. Nathan Caldwell sat in a dimly lit library, surrounded by ancient books and yellowed documents, his mind racing with the revelation he had uncovered. Angelina Jolie's name was tied to a royal bloodline, one that had been deliberately erased from history. The weight of this discovery pressed heavily on him. If it were true, then Angelina Jolie was not just a Hollywood star or a humanitarian. She was the descendant of a forgotten heir, a direct link to a branch of royalty that had been wiped from existence. Nathan knew that if Angelina Jolie had no idea about this, then he was about to change everything she knew about herself. But if she did know, then that meant she had been hiding it for a reason. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, perhaps, even Angelina Jolie herself, had worked to keep this secret buried. And now he was about to bring it back into the light. He spent hours combing through more records, desperate for a concrete link. He found references to a noblewoman from the 1800s, one whose lineage had been removed from official royal documents. The woman had been exiled from court under mysterious circumstances, her name slowly fading from history, yet her descendants had lived on. Everything pointed to Angelina Jolie being part of that lost line, but there was still one missing piece. He needed a definitive connection, something irrefutable. Nathan had no choice. He had to go directly to Angelina Jolie. Tracking down Angelina Jolie was harder than he had expected. She was always moving, always involved in projects, diplomatic, meetings, or humanitarian work. Her ability to vanish from the public eye whenever she wanted made her one of the most elusive figures in Hollywood. Every attempt he made to contact her was met with silence. No responses, no returned messages. It was as if Angelina Jolie already knew someone was looking for her. After days of searching, Nathan received an anonymous tip, a simple message with an address, no signature, no explanation. It led to a secluded estate on the outskirts of London, a place so private that no paparazzi had ever managed to get close. Nathan hesitated before deciding to go. If Angelina Jolie had agreed to this meeting, it meant she was aware of what he had uncovered, and if she hadn't, then someone else had arranged it for reasons he couldn't yet understand. The drive to the estate was long, the countryside stretching endlessly beyond the road. The building itself was grand but unassuming, hidden behind tall iron gates and towering trees. Nathan stepped out of the car, his heart pounding as he approached the entrance. He had spent his life chasing secrets, but this one felt different. This time, the secret was waiting for him. A butler opened the door without a word, leading him through quiet hallways, past portraits of noble figures whose eyes seemed to follow him. The air was heavy, as if carrying the weight of history itself. At last, the doors to a grand sitting room opened, and there, standing by the window with her back to him, was Angelina Jolie. She did not turn at first, only watching the landscape beyond the glass. Nathan could tell immediately that she had been expecting him. Angelina Jolie was not surprised, nor did she seem confused about why he was here. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment. Finally, Angelina Jolie turned to face him, her expression unreadable. She studied him, the silence between them stretching as if measuring whether she could trust him. Nathan took a slow breath, reaching into his bag and pulling out the documents he had gathered. He placed them on the table between them, watching as Angelina Jolie's eyes flickered over the papers, her fingers grazing the old parchment. She did not react immediately. Angelina Jolie moved carefully, turning the pages, reading the names, absorbing the history that had been hidden from her for so long. Nathan expected shock, denial, something, but instead, Angelina Jolie remained still, her face giving nothing away. Nathan told her what he had found, how her lineage traced back to an exiled noblewoman, how her ancestors had been erased from the royal family's records. He explained that someone had deliberately hidden this connection, burying the truth so that it would never surface. Angelina Jolie listened, not interrupting, not questioning. It was as if she had always known there was something missing, something just beyond her reach. Then finally, Angelina Jolie exhaled and leaned back slightly, as if carrying the weight of history on her shoulders. She admitted that she had always felt a disconnect, a sense that there was something in her blood that pulled her toward a different kind of life. She had spent years fighting for justice, seeking out lost histories, advocating for displaced families, perhaps because, deep down, she had always been searching for her own origins. Nathan watched as Angelina Jolie traced her fingers over the documents again as if feeling the presence of those who had come before her. He could see it now, how she carried herself, how she had always moved with an unspoken sense of duty. This wasn't just a discovery. This was the missing piece of Angelina Jolie's identity, one that had been kept from her for reasons she might never fully understand. Nathan asked Angelina Jolie if she wanted to go public with the information. They could prove it. They could make history acknowledge what had been buried for so long. But Angelina Jolie only smiled faintly, shaking her head. She told him that some truths were not meant to be headlines. Nathan understood. This was not about fame, not about claiming a title or forcing the world to recognize a forgotten bloodline. This was about something deeper, about knowing who you were, even when history had tried to erase you. As Angelina Jolie stood taking one last look at the documents before closing the folder, Nathan realized that this secret had never been about power. It had been about identity. And now that Angelina Jolie knew the truth, she was free to decide what to do with it. Nathan had come here expecting to reveal a lost piece of history. Instead, he had found something far more important. Angelina Jolie had already been a queen, in her own right, long before she had ever known of her royal blood. Nathan Caldwell sat in his London hotel room, his mind restless despite the silence surrounding him. He had spent years chasing stories that others were too afraid to touch, but nothing had ever felt as significant as what he had just uncovered about Angelina Jolie. He had expected shock, denial, maybe even disbelief from her. Instead, she had listened, as if she had always suspected there was something more to her past. Angelina Jolie had accepted the truth with the kind of quiet understanding that only came from someone who had spent their life searching for answers. Nathan replayed their conversation in his mind, the way Angelina Jolie had studied the documents, her fingers trailing over the names of ancestors who had been erased from history. She had not asked how he had found the information, nor had she questioned its validity. It was as if some part of her had already known, as if she had felt the weight of a legacy that had been hidden from her for generations. Angelina Jolie had carried herself with the same regal presence that he had seen in those old paintings of queens and princesses, an unconscious connection to the bloodline she had never been told about. Nathan knew that the story didn't end here. If Angelina Jolie's lineage had been deliberately erased, then there were people, powerful people, who had ensured it stayed buried. Someone had made the decision to cut her ancestors out of royal history, and that decision had shaped everything that had followed. Angelina Jolie had unknowingly lived a life dictated by the choices of those who had come before her, and now, for the first time, she had the power to reclaim what had been taken. Nathan had spent the past few days trying to track down additional proof, something that would confirm beyond any doubt that Angelina Jolie was connected to the royal family. He had followed leads that took him deep into old aristocratic estates, private libraries filled with forbidden records, and historical archives that had not been touched in decades. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that Angelina Jolie was not just distantly related to the royal bloodline. She was the descendant of a deliberate cover-up, a hidden branch of the monarchy that had been severed from history. Nathan knew that Angelina Jolie was not someone who chased power, nor was she interested in claiming a throne. She had spent her life fighting for the forgotten, for those who had been displaced, for those whose stories had been silenced. But now she had to face the reality that she too had been one of them. Angelina Jolie had been born into a world that had deliberately erased her origins, and now that she knew the truth, she had to decide what to do with it. Nathan had arranged to meet Angelina Jolie again, this time in a more private setting. The estate where they had first spoken had felt like neutral ground, but this time, she had chosen the location, a secluded property, far from the eyes of the media. When he arrived, he found her standing outside, looking out over the vast countryside, the wind pulling gently at her hair. She had always belonged in front of cameras, in grand settings, on the world's biggest stages, and yet here, in the quiet of history's shadow, Angelina Jolie looked more at home than he had ever seen her. Nathan handed Angelina Jolie a small, worn envelope, one he had found in the depths of an aristocratic archive. Inside, there was a document signed by a long-dead nobleman, acknowledging the existence of a child born into the royal bloodline, but never recognized. Angelina Jolie took the paper, reading it carefully, her expression unreadable. For a long time, Angelina Jolie said nothing. Nathan watched as she processed the weight of what she was holding, tangible proof that her family had been part of something greater, yet had been denied their place in history. Angelina Jolie had always fought for the truth, had spent her life giving voices to those who had none. Now she had to face the fact that she too had been silenced. Nathan told Angelina Jolie that they could take this public, that they could expose what had been hidden for so long. He told her that the world deserved to know that she was not just an actress, not just a humanitarian, but the descendant of a royal lineage that had been erased. Angelina Jolie shook her head, folding the document carefully before placing it back in the envelope. She told him that history was full of stories like hers, stories of people who had been removed, rewritten, forgotten. She had spent her life standing for justice, but she had never done it for titles, for recognition, for power. Angelina Jolie did not need a royal claim to define who she was. Nathan could see the conflict in Angelina Jolie's eyes. She had uncovered a truth that had been hidden from her for generations. But what did it change? She had never needed a throne to command the world's attention. She had never needed a crown to lead. What would exposing this story truly accomplish? Angelina Jolie had spent her life shaping her own identity, and now she had the chance to reclaim her past. But at what cost? Nathan asked Angelina Jolie if she would ever reveal this to the public, if there would come a time when she would stand before the world and acknowledge the truth. Angelina Jolie told him that some stories were meant to be held, not shared. Some histories were meant to be understood, not rewritten. She had found what she had been missing, and that was enough. As Nathan prepared to leave, he saw Angelina Jolie standing in the fading light, still holding the envelope that contained her lost past. She had spent years searching for meaning, for connection, for something that explained the path her life had taken. Now she had found it, and yet, Angelina Jolie knew that the truth was not something that always needed to be told. Nathan realized that Angelina Jolie had not just inherited a royal bloodline. She had inherited its burdens, its secrets, its weight, and now it was hers, to carry, in whatever way she chose. Nathan Caldwell sat in the quiet of his hotel room, staring at the folder that held the final pieces of the mystery surrounding Angelina Jolie. He had spent weeks chasing this story, uncovering the hidden bloodline that had been erased from history. And now he had everything: documents, ancestral records, undeniable proof that Angelina Jolie was the descendant of a lost royal line. Yet despite all the power this truth held, he knew that it would never see the light of day. Angelina Jolie had made her decision. Nathan thought back to their last meeting, the way Angelina Jolie had stood in the golden dusk of the English countryside, holding the fragile envelope that contained the story of her forgotten ancestors. She had read every word, traced every signature, absorbed the weight of the revelation. But she had not wavered, had not allowed it to consume her. She had taken the truth, held it in her hands, and then chosen to keep it for herself. Nathan had asked Angelina Jolie if she wanted to expose the secret, if she wanted to reclaim what had been stolen from her lineage. She had looked at him then, her expression unreadable, and told him that some truths were not meant to be shouted into the world. Angelina Jolie had spent her life fighting for justice, for the stories that mattered, and she knew better than anyone that power was not found in titles or crowns. She had never needed royal blood to command respect. Nathan had left the estate that night knowing that he would never publish this story. He had spent his career revealing hidden histories, but this one belonged to Angelina Jolie, and only she had the right to decide what to do with it. In the days that followed, Nathan continued his research, not for the sake of exposing it, but simply to understand. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that Angelina Jolie's story was not just about a missing heir. It was about the lengths to which power would go to erase those it deemed unworthy. Angelina Jolie's ancestors had been written out of history, not because they were weak, but because they had threatened the established order. Nathan found himself wondering if Angelina Jolie had always felt this, if she had always known, deep down, that she carried something greater than herself. Her relentless dedication to lost causes, her drive to fight for those who had no voice. It was as if she had been reclaiming her lineage long before she ever knew it existed. Nathan knew that the weight of this truth would remain with Angelina Jolie, just as it remained with him. He imagined her now, carrying on with her life as she always had, knowing something that no one else did. She would never look at herself the same way again, but she would never let it change who she was. Angelina Jolie had not built her legacy on a title, and she never would. Nathan wondered if there would ever come a day when Angelina Jolie would choose to reveal what she knew. Perhaps one day, when history was ready, she would step forward and acknowledge the past that had been hidden from her. But for now, she had chosen silence, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Nathan closed the folder, running his fingers over its edges before placing it inside a locked drawer. The truth about Angelina Jolie and her royal lineage would remain here, buried in paper and ink, known only to those who had uncovered it. It was not his story to tell, and so he would let it rest. As he sat back in his chair, staring out at the London skyline, he thought about Angelina Jolie, about the history she carried within her. She had spent her life searching for meaning, for purpose, for something that would define her beyond the expectations of the world. And now, she had found. But Angelina Jolie had already made her choice. She did not need a throne. She had already built her own kingdom.